right, my friends. Here we are. What a time to be alive, man. I'll tell you what. Hope everyone had a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Today we are back with another live stream. It's been, I think, just a couple weeks. Maybe, I don't even remember. Maybe we did it last week. I have no idea. Time has been indeed flying by. And excited to talk about today's episode. Tomorrow, as the date of recording this, my episode is going to be coming out on men's dress. And so I've talked a lot about that on social media recently, and very excited for this podcast episode because I think it's very needed. And I'm just very much looking forward to releasing this and just hopefully a lot of the conversations that it'll create, because I've had some great conversations about it already. And a lot of friends of mine, people that I know, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be even further convicted by it after tomorrow's podcast episode. It's one of those things I think a lot of people who need to listen will not listen, but alas, we will be grateful for whoever does listen, and hopefully it'll make an impact in some people's lives. But I hope that you can utilize this podcast episode for some of you. I know I had a lot of women who reached out, and I just hope that it can be a conversation starter. I think for a lot of people, it's a difficult and touchy subject. I had a lot of people asking me, Nathan, how do I convince my boyfriend or my fiance or my husband to dress a little nicer? How do I convince them of the importance of that? And so I tried to give some of that advice in this episode, and also just talk about the importance of it, the importance of us for us men, and just how critical it can be to our self-worth and all of that. And today's episode is going to be kind of a spinoff of that. It's going to be talking about respect. And so I think the topic of respect is really important because of the book Love and Respect. And I'm sure many of you have read that. It's one of the most popular. It's kind of up there to me with like 5 love languages and books like that, where we're talking about the differences between men and women, the differences in the way that people want to be loved, and how we express that love to one another as husband and wife, even in male and female friendships or co-working relationships and things like that too. The key theme of the book is that men find it really difficult to love when they feel disrespected. Women find it really difficult to respect when they feel unloved. And the key thing there is that when you ask the majority of men if they prefer love or respect, the majority of them will say that they prefer respect over love, over feeling loved. That means that they prefer to hear things like, I'm proud of you. I respect how hard you worked on this. I really appreciate your hard work for our family. I admire the man that you are. I admire your character. I admire the way you did X, Y, or Z. They prefer that over, I love you. You're so special. You look so good. Things like that, right? Now, I enjoy being told that I look good by Emily. I can't lie to you. But that's probably just the vanity in me. But I do find myself in that category. I would say, yes, without a doubt, hearing that I'm proud of you, or I admire you, or I respect how hard you worked. I respect that you stuck through with this, and the things that you're doing here or there, or your character, means immensely more to me than hearing I love you. And that was something that was really eye-opening to me as I read the book. And obviously in the book, women tend to be the opposite, right? Instead of hearing I'm proud of you, I respect how hard you worked, the majority of women, not all women, but the majority of women prefer to hear I love you and that I care about you and I see you. They prefer to feel heard, right, than to be respected per se. And it really spoke to me because of the fact that I felt like this in a lot of my life, especially the female relationships in my life. My relationship with my mom, my relationship with my grandparents, I just had, I feel like a fairly women-dominated upbringing. And I just felt this a lot, where I was told I was loved a lot, but then didn't feel supported sometimes with my pursuit of excellence, my pursuit of having a devout faith life, my pursuit of wanting to be extremely fit, especially during my time in the Army, and wanting to achieve these high goals. And so when I read this book and started to understand, like, wow, it is very love language-esque, where it's like a lot of women feel like, oh, I tell my husband I love him all the time. Of course I love him, but he's still deeply unhappy because of the fact that he yearns for respect more than he yearns for love, right? And so I'm going to turn my, luckily I remember to turn my reactions off so I don't get any bubbles this time. Hopefully no thumbs up, bubbles, or fireworks. But I think it's really important to understand that. There's some other really great parts of the book. I'd love to do a breakdown. Maybe Emily and I will do kind of an episode on the book someday. Maybe this week. We might record together this week, actually. But I just want to get into this idea of respect. And you may have seen the title of this is that respect is earned. It's not an entitlement, right? It's not something that you're entitled to. And I think in regards to, I just started the book, and I mean started, like I listened to 30 seconds of it, The Anxious Generation by, I think it's by Haidt, by Jonathan Haidt, if I'm not mistaken, but I can confirm that. But I think about anxiety in our generation. I think about all the negative stats I hear about young men all the time that I feel very passionately about, right? I hate the fact that young men are lonelier than ever. I hate the fact that young men have such high rates of suicide. I hate the fact that young men are just disaffected in so many ways, right? They're so despondent and despairing and apathetic and disassociating from life through things like pornography and video games and these other addictions. Drug addictions obviously are very, very high, alcoholism, and a host of other things that are keeping young men from living fulfilled lives. And I've said many times before that this is the direction I want to go in, generally speaking, even though I think a lot of this wisdom will apply to both sexes. But I want to address this issue with young men. And I think that, to me, a lot of the reason why there's this loneliness, there's this sadness, there's this lack of fulfillment, and this aching of the heart of the modern day man is the fact that they don't feel respected a lot of times. And we can appreciate, and I think most people who are here listening to this understand and agree that young men are generally not respected in society, right? Masculinity is no longer really respected in society, because of the term toxic masculinity and feminism's approach to just degrading masculinity at all costs while also trying to emulate it in its worst forms, or at least things that are considered masculine. The masculine vices is what a lot of feminists try to replicate in their lives, but ignore a lot of the masculine virtues. It's a strange thing and it's a strange time, but we see this and it's trickling down into many areas of life. We were just with a friend of ours recently who's a high school teacher on the East Coast, and she was telling us a story about all these young boys in her class that are addicted to drugs, that come to her saying that they're addicted to drugs or they just don't know how to stop, smoking weed or doing harder drugs, pills and things like that. And one of the reasons why they say that they do it is because they just want to have friends. And what I think a lot of times peer pressure is driven, I think a lot of times in different ways, going back to this love and respect thing for girls and boys, where I think women are more likely to fold into peer pressure, cave into peer pressure for the feelings of love, for feeling loved and accepted. Where boys is for respect, right? They don't want to be seen as lame. They don't want to be seen as soft. And so it's like this kind of challenge, like, come on, man, why won't you do it? Like challenging, attempting, and daring one another to do things that are not healthy, that are not good, but will be seen by this group of people to be something that shows you that you're masculine, that you're tough, that you're strong, that you're one of them, right? But I think that aside from that, we also have this belief running through Gen Z and millennials that anything that's good should be an entitlement. This obviously exemplifies itself most thoroughly and most commonly, I think, through politics and entitlements from the government. Believing that our student loan should be wiped away, that we should be provided a basic income, even if we're not working, that all of our work should be worth $20 an hour at minimum, amongst many other things, right? Healthcare, like everything should just be free. It should just be provided to us by other people. And that's the idea of entitlements, right? Is that we're just entitled to everything. And so we shouldn't have to work for things. And that's, I think, a lot of times how young men will approach respect, is we want to just say, well, this is a need of mine, and it is. And because it's a need, a lot of times we think that our wants should even be entitlements, but because it's a need or a want, I should be entitled to it. And people should respect me. And we see this going beyond respect. Because to me, respect is a little bit lower than like true acceptance, right? Because acceptance is accepting you for both your good and your bad, right? That's kind of what I think about when I think of acceptance. Tolerance is just kind of letting you exist, but like forcing that somebody accepts you. When you think about like Pride Month is a good example of this, when these things are kind of being forced upon us and we're like, accept this and embrace this, not just tolerate it, not just be okay with it happening. Nobody's trying to make a lot of these things that are celebrated during Pride Month illegal, except for the things that are grossly immoral that usually have to do with children. But it goes beyond tolerance to say, not only do you tolerate it, but we want to go to the next level where you should respect it, right? You should think that it's equally as good and worthwhile and valuable as regular marriage. But then we're going to go past that and say you have to actually accept it and bring it into your home and allow it everywhere in society and accept the fact that it's going to be just shoved in your face most of the year, but especially during the month of June. And so because of this kind of approach to things, I think we do just kind of have this belief that respect should be an entitlement. But the thing is that respect can never be an entitlement. Just like acceptance can really never be an entitlement, right? You can't actually force it because respect and acceptance truly have to do they're kind of works of the heart, right? I can't force Emily to respect me as a man. That's why you always have to earn it. I can't force you guys to respect me as a man, right? My listeners out there, people that I meet, my coworkers, I can't force them to respect me. There's no amount you can become a tyrant, and this is what a lot of husbands and fathers resort to is they don't live lives that are actually worthy of respect. And so a lot of times what they'll do is through anger and power and control and money, they will kind of force this, they will force obedience and they will settle for obedience rather than respect. And obedience can a lot of times look like respect because you do listen to oftentimes the people that you respect, right? If there's somebody that you respect and they ask you to do something, you usually will do it, especially obviously if they're in a position of authority, like a husband or a father or something like that, or a boss, right? But we've all had bosses like this as well, where they have their positional authority, which is markedly different from being respected. But because they have a position of authority, people do what they say and they feel better about themselves and they feel like they have this power, which they do, but they don't have influence. You can have control and not have influence. And you can see that, I think, especially as a husband, father, as a man in somebody's life, by not just how much people listen to you when they're forced to listen to you, right? When they're at the dinner table and they have nothing else to do but listen to you spew on about something. But do these people in your life, your children, your eventually, I'll probably have some sons and daughter-in-laws. I have coworkers, I have friends. Do people come to me for advice? Solicited advice. I give a lot of unsolicited advice. You guys listening now are listening to some of my unsolicited, or I guess it's somewhat solicited if you're tuning in and listening to this. But you get what I'm saying. I give a lot of unsolicited advice, and sometimes I try to ask people like, "Hey, are you interested in some unsolicited advice?" But I ramble on about things all the time. If you know me, you know this to be the case. But I know that people respect me when they say, "Hey, could we grab coffee?" And I want to ask for your insights on something. Doesn't mean that I want them to do everything that I say, but just enough that they respect my opinion is very satisfying to me. It's meaningful, right? It shows that I've become someone that they deem worthy of respect, and they're interested in hearing what I have to say on a topic or a decision that's important in their lives. And that, I think, as a man, is something that we all yearn for. And I think a lot of us don't have that. And today I'm going to talk about some of the ways that we go about gaining that, how we can grow in that. I think a lot of times we see men that are drawn to this red pill movement. I actually want to do, I don't know if you guys have seen this. I'm going to be posting it on Locals this week. So if you haven't joined us on Locals for free, you can join us at seekingexcellence.locals.com. We are just like 28 supporters away from keeping things going to Seeking Excellence. Our goal is 100 by September 1st. So if you've been thinking about it for a while, today's your day to come join us at Locals. But I posted a podcast that I found really impactful recently. And then there was another one that I'm going to do a little reaction video to. And this was a podcast interview between Michael Knowles and Justin, I want to say it's Waller, something like that. I recognize his face, but I honestly hadn't heard his name until I saw it on this YouTube interview. And he's one of the red pill guys, right? He's friends with Andrew Tate. He's an Andrew Tate type. I don't want to totally lump him in with him. I would say they seemed, from the little that I've consumed of both of them, seem like they have a lot of overlap in their approach towards women, their approach towards money, privacy around their family life, lack of commitment in any type of, or interest in any type of monogamous relationship, and all of that. There's a lot of overlap. But it was really interesting to see a traditional Catholic sit down and have a conversation with this guy and really push into all these different topics. I thought Michael did an excellent job. I think I might have like 15 minutes left in it or something, but I thought he did a great job of really asking him the important questions that you'd want somebody to ask in a situation like that. And these are things I would love to do someday. Should I hit 100 supporters on locals and be able to continue to grow the channel and the mission here. But I think what I saw in that, and what I've always seen in this, and this is one of the things I've talked about a lot when it comes to Catholic men, masculinity, men's conferences, men's initiatives, all the things, is we don't have a lot of men who are willing to say what they believe unapologetically. There's not a lot of unapologetic Catholicism out there. And I've already ranted about this with the Butker stuff and other things where every time we do get a man who actually says what he believes, even if he's just opining a little bit, like we have just a ton of pushback, typically from women. But I think that this is one of the key things that draws a lot of young men into this red pill movement, why Andrew Tate is so appealing to them, is that they seem like they have a lot of respect from the world. It seems like women respect them. He talks about how many women are just constantly knocking down his door to get with him, to sleep with him, to spend time with him. They have a lot of power and influence in the world. Obviously, there's lots of people who listen to them and tune into what they have to say. They have a lot of money, which is also often seen as a form of or something that draws respect from other people, right? And then they have fame. And we know that, like in America in general, we really respect the famous. We take their opinions and things very seriously, more seriously than we ought to most of the time. This is true in the church as well, I think. And these really kind of hit on what I listened to another podcast that I shared or will share on locals was with Dr. Why can't I think of his name? What's your name? He does the science of happiness on Hallow. That's what I'm trying to look up to see if I can find it. Because I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Dr. Arthur Brooks. Yeah, you know I got the Hallow app pulled up all the time, baby. So Dr. Arthur Brooks from Harvard, great Catholic man. Literally, I think he's like one of the best embodiments of seeking excellence in the world, of this philosophy of life. He's an awesome dude. But he shared that he kind of thinks of these four main idols that people have in their lives. He was recently on Modern Wisdom. If you've ever listened to Chris Williamson and Modern Wisdom, I love it. One of my favorite podcasts. And it was one of my favorite episodes of all time on that podcast. Four idols: money, power, pleasure, and honor. And so these guys, basically the red pill movement, these are the four idols that most people in the 21st century have. The red pill movement embodies all of these, right? They feel like they have all of these things and they pursue them constantly. And what you'll see as I kind of do the reaction video eventually is it leads to a very unfulfilling life. And this guy's kind of, in my opinion, lying, saying that he's got the best life of anybody in the world, as he just pursues pleasure and money endlessly with no satisfaction. But we've all seen how that ultimately plays out, right? Like it's not a long lasting thing. People have been doing that for all of eternity, and it always ends poorly. But we don't like to learn from the mistakes of other people. But going back to this red pill movement, why do young men get so drawn to that? It's because these guys seem like they have the respect of the world. And the men want to know, especially us young men who don't have strong father figures in our lives or role models. We want to know, how can I become that? How can I become a respectable man? Another place that a man really yearns for respect is within himself. For you young men out there, do you respect yourself? When you look in the mirror, when you think about yourself, do you honestly respect yourself? When you go into, I think about this most recently, I had this tested. It wasn't a job interview, just to clarify. I'm not looking for work. I love my job. But I think everybody at Hallow's always hustling, right? So we always have side things going. And I was working on a side project with some people. Actually, I hinted at it on the podcast several months ago because I thought we'd be launched by now. But basically, this venture that I was working on with a couple guys, another guy was brought in, and he basically questioned the value that I bring to the table. And as you guys can probably imagine, I'm not one to be low on self-respect or self-confidence. Now, what I want to getting into some of these practicals here is how did I grow in that and how did I increase that over time? I think you can balance, and the proper place for humility is to not have no self respect and no love for yourself. Contrarily, it's to recognize that all the goodness in your life comes from God, all the good things you've ever done where grace is from God, and that it's because of your rightly ordered relationship with God, knowing who you are, knowing who He is, knowing who plays what role, that you're able to have confidence in what you've done in the past, and you're able to have confidence in what God is continuing to try to work through you. And so for me, when I get into those situations, it's an evaluation and a testing moment of my self-respect to say, okay, am I going to try to sell myself to this young man who um, seems to have very different values than I do, different character than I do? Am I gonna kind of stoop to this level of constantly trying to pitch myself to people? I think that I'm past that in my life. I think there's a time for that. If I were to be interviewing for another job, that's a time for that, right? To be selling myself to a company or to another organization. But you also have to have lines, right? There has to be some limits. There has to be limits and places where you will not do that, right? Where you will not say, no, I'm not gonna. I had the same thing happen. I was thinking about it this morning because I've been thinking about this topic all day, most of this week. I remember I had a girlfriend. I think it was in high school or something like that. I can't even remember. It had to be in high school when I think because I remember which girl it was. And she said something to me about along the lines of like, don't get too comfortable because there's other guys who want to date me or whatever. And I've always been cocky. I've always erred on the side of cockiness. I know this is a surprise to no one, but I'm just like, I know who I am as well. Right. And I have respect for myself to the degree that I'm not going to let anybody, but I'm not going to let a girl that I'm dating or somebody else make me feel like I'm less than. And it's not something that is, again, it doesn't have to be pride driven, but you don't also, but part of humility is not needing to like bow down to the pride of other people. So if you see somebody inflating themselves more than they ought to, right? And I think this is especially applicable when you're talking about things in the world of business, right? Because you're going to have that. When you're coming into a job opportunity, it's not humble for me to say, oh, you want to pay me half of what my last job was paying me because you don't think that I'm worth it? No, I can sit here and say, I know what your company's doing. Your company is not, let's say I'm going into a company that is not thriving, into a sales team that's not thriving. I know that you guys are not thriving. I know that I have this track record of succeeding in my sales and exceeding expectations. And I expect you to pay me more than that. I don't think that I should start out as a junior salesman. And they can agree or disagree and we can part ways if needed. That's not an area. I mean, it might be pride on one side or the other, depending on the nuance of the situation. But it's still something that we have to start to realize when we're dealing with business and people and relationships that there is power dynamics at play. And so when you come into something, you can have respect for yourself and say, okay, I can recognize who you are and what you bring to the table, and I can appreciate that. But I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm some nobody off the street that can't do anything and that I don't bring any value. If you want to act that way, that's fine, but we might not be a good fit for business partners together. And so it doesn't have to be a prideful or mean or rude thing, but I'm just trying to give you guys an example of how we can start to develop respect for ourselves and display our respect for ourselves through this. Now, where it becomes prideful, if I was just, and this is where you get a lot of entitlement from, if I was just some 31-year-old that lives in my mom's basement and plays video games all day and hasn't been able to hold down a job for more than 6 months at a time, then maybe it's pretty stupid for me to be talking to somebody like this if they're willing to bring me in on a business venture. You have to accurately understand. So it has to be grounded in reality. Living with integrity, having self-respect has to be grounded in reality. And this is something and this is what I'm going back to the example of the dads who become tyrants, the husbands who become tyrants, is that even though they might be like somewhat satisfied with controlling people, it's never as fulfilling. It's never as fulfilling as living a truly respectable life and having influence in the lives of other people. I'm telling you this as somebody who's done both because I've been the type of friend who was manipulative, who was constantly dishonest, who was deceitful. I've cheated in school, like you name it. Like I've achieved honors and awards and received rewards from things that I did not earn or deserve. And it's very unfulfilling. Contrarily, I've done things like graduate from Ranger School, become a husband, become a father, have influence in the lives of other people, especially in the lives of other men. And it's the most rewarding, fulfilling thing I've ever experienced. Other than knowing that I'm rightly ordered with God, which is first and foremost. But when you start to lose that, when I lose my relationship with Jesus Christ, or maybe I should point to Jesus behind me. Sorry, I was pointing at my crucifix on the wall over there, but I also got the Lord back here. So if I have my relationship with God correct, and I'm striving for holiness and virtue every day, then I'm going to have peace in my heart that's going to be resilient towards even other people who don't respect me, and recognize that some people aren't going to like me, and that's okay. That's my first level of integrity. My next level of integrity, I think, is within myself. And it's saying, am I the kind of man who does the things that I say I'm going to do? Am I the type of man who does hard things? What type of man do I respect? Who are the men in my life that I respect, and do I emulate them? Because choosing who I respect is going to be a big determining factor on whether or not I'm able to respect myself, because it's going to determine the criteria with which I will grade myself that will determine my self-respect. And so I have to choose, what kind of people do I respect, and what do I respect about them? And don't be afraid to pick and choose when you're developing this vision for the man that you want to become. You get to pick and choose from different people. I respect Jordan Peterson's intellect and his ability to get up on stage and speak profoundly on a topic for an hour with no notes. That doesn't mean I have to respect his faith life, but I can respect that about him and say, okay, as a public speaker, as an aspiring thought leader, as a thinker, I don't want to be a Catholic speaker. I've always said I want to be a Catholic thinker. I can appreciate that about him, even if I don't agree with all of his conclusions. Then I can say, I respect this about my pastor, but we're different in that I'm married and he's not. But I respect this about Tim Urban, who's a great husband and father, and how I want to learn from him and how I want to emulate him in my life. And I can kind of pick and choose in different things. Tim's somebody that you can respect in all areas, and that's the kind of man I ultimately want to be, right? And so I can think about guys like Tim and say, okay, how can I be more like him? How can I pursue his wisdom, his knowledge, and things like that, and try to do that intentionally, or every opportunity that I get, and be the kind of man, by doing so, that Tim is going to respect, and that Tim is going to appreciate, that Tim is going to like and enjoy being around, right? That Tim's going to want his sons to be around, that Tim's going to have his sons listening to Seeking Excellence, hopefully. That's the kind of thing that you can start to think about is, all right, if this is the problem with the red pill movement, when you start to give those men power in your life, you're going to start to emulate them and do the things that they do. And I think that they're genuinely lying to people. I think they're misinformed on what will make them happy, but I think they're lying to people about being happy. And I could be wrong about that. I know that's a prideful thing to say. Somebody says they're happy and he's saying he lives the most fulfilled life in the world. And I'm saying, no, that can't be true based on my beliefs, because I know that sin makes you deeply unhappy. And just going around sleeping with women while he refers to some woman as his wife, and he has kids and he has daughters. But he just goes around and just like says his wife helps him to find girlfriends and all this like really weird stuff, that I'm like, yeah, I think it's a pretty universal rule that if you have a family and you're just sleeping around, you're not going to like yourself very much. And I've put on the facade, and I know that you can put on the facade of saying like, oh no, I'm super confident on this stuff and it's really cool. And yeah, it just doesn't, not for long, right? Maybe for a certain period of time, but I know that in the long run, that does not lead to fulfillment. So that's something you have to understand. So you have to be careful with who are you going to respect? Who do you want respect of? Because you're not going to get respect from everyone. You're not going to get respect from everyone, and you're not going to like everyone, right? There's a lot of people out there, and you guys know this if you've been listening for the last few weeks, right? I've had people from my past who deeply don't respect me, deeply do not like me from the things that I put out, the things that I believe, the things that I say, and that's going to happen to any of us. But that's where you decide on your integrity and who you want to be respected by, and you strive to have the respect to be the type of person who can be admired by the right people, by others who are God-fearing, by others who are passionately trying to live lives of holiness and virtue and goodness and excellence, right? So last couple of things here. My final message. So I talked about that, right? So the first level of integrity and feeling at peace with yourself and having I don't want to say we want respect from God, but I think that the line that we hear as Jesus is getting baptized is really important. Here's my beloved son with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him, right? Doesn't every man want to feel like God would be willing to say that about them to other people, right? At your parish, in your community, to your friends, to the other people who are God fearing. Here is my beloved son with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Obviously, not to the same level that Jesus was listened to, right? But just to feel that God would entrust you. This is the thing that's moving to me when I get to speak in front of crowds, when I feel like God has truly led me to this moment. That's how I feel. We start with the love of God, right? And we all have God's love. God loves each and every one of us. If he didn't love us, we wouldn't exist. He loves us so much that he would die for us on the cross all over again. He would have done it just for us, right? He would have done it just for one of us. We recognize that. That's how much God loves you. He would have everything he went through, incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, ascension, he would have done just for you. The next step in that is with whom I am well pleased, right? And so to be somebody with whom God is well pleased means that I have to have the right character. I have to be striving to live in a state of grace, living in a state of grace, receiving the sacraments, living the moral life, believing the things that are taught in the church, the creed, the doctrines of the church, and I have to have a prayer life, right? The 4 parts of the catechism. That's how I become someone with whom God is well pleased. The next step of that is listen to him. And so how do I become somebody that's worth listening to? Somebody that's worthy of a leadership position, that's worthy of influencing the lives of other people, that's worthy of being a husband, worthy of being a father, worthy of leading and being a person of influence. So that's the first part. That's my relationship with God. The second part is my integrity with myself. And that's whether or not I'm living my virtues, living my values, prioritizing the things that I claim are important. Am I the type of person that gets up on time? Am I the type of person that shows up on time? And that starts to flow out into the things that are going to be respectable to other people. And so if I want to grow in respect to other people, it's very similar to the respect that I'll have for myself, but I have to become a respectable person. And that includes a lot of different things, but this is where it flows out of the things we've been talking about most recently, namely that of dress and appearance. Am I showing up like an idiot when I show up to things? Am I showing up to an event? Now, I talked last week about my parish event that I had some men that were showing up in worn out basketball shorts and old polos. First of all, you never wear basketball shorts and a polo together. There's never an occasion for that. Unless you're going to a clown show or something. I don't know. But there's never an occasion for that. But I'm somebody like I spoke at this event last year in June. Am I going to show up as a former speaker now? Someone who's a podcaster that people are showing up there, they listen to my podcast, they follow me, or they listen to some of the things that I put out. Is that how I'm going to show up? In worn out basketball shorts and a polo, looking like a goofball? No, right? Why? Because I want to be somebody that they can respect. That's who I want. And it's not just I want to be that, it's who I am. I've been striving to build this person that I've become over the years. And I'm not going to throw that away for 2 hours of being 3% more comfortable than I would be otherwise. The other thing, the way that we speak. Am I a respectable person in my way that I can articulate my values? I can articulate my beliefs, not just my beliefs in my faith, but my political stances. Am I somebody that think about the people you don't respect, right? And do the opposite of them. It's the people I don't respect. An example of this when it comes to being articulate is they have strongly held beliefs, but they can't explain them. They can't tell you why they believe abortion should be illegal. They just believe it should because it's women's rights and you're a misogynist. Who do you respect less than the people who just call you racist because they disagree with you? We can do the opposite of that in our world by not having an explanation, not having the reason for the hope that is inside of us, as St. Peter encourages us to have in 1 Peter, I think it's 4. Next, we have knowledge and wisdom. So am I growing in knowledge and wisdom? Again, this goes back to listen to him, right? This is my beloved son with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. What do you have to say? Do you know anything about anything important? Right? And do we have knowledge and wisdom? Are we able to have conversations about things and not just sports and religion all the time, but can you have conversations about other topics? Can you talk loosely about history or about ideas or about art or nature or whatever it might be? Just interesting topics. Are you able to actually have conversations with people? Do you know anything about anything? And then wisdom is even more important. If people are going to come to you for advice and insights, you have to be growing in wisdom, especially in the seven pillars. So that means in politics, in culture, in mindset, in relationships, in finances, all of these things. Next, we have confidence, profession and work, and then most importantly, your character, right? So just kind of wrapping up here, we have confidence. So I've talked about this a little bit already, but are you somebody who is self confident? Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in the things that you say you believe in? Are you somebody, when you have that self integrity, that's how you're going to grow in your confidence, right? That's what's going to allow you to actually be confident, is not just, fake confidence by saying, hey, I'm really not just being super cocky about everything, but actually having degrees of confidence where you are somebody who respect yourself. You believe in what you've done. You have a track record of doing difficult things, of actually striving for excellence in different areas. You've overcome things before, and you remember the things that you've overcome, and you can see this path, this track, this history of overcoming, of doing things, of embracing difficulty. You're not somebody that bitches and complains constantly. That's going to allow you to have that confidence to move forward and know that even if there's things that are new to you, you can be confident in that situation because you're adaptable. You're somebody that overcomes. That's who you are. So you don't have to fake it and try to be fake about it, but you can actually believe in yourself and know that you're somebody that brings value to the table, to any room that you're a part of. Next, you have profession and work. I've told this story before, and I'll tell it again because I think it's an important one. I remember, this is going to be the speedy version of it, but I was at a men's gathering. This was like 6 months ago, maybe not that long ago, maybe 4 months ago. I don't know. Maybe it was a year ago, actually, because it was warm outside and Jordan was little. We were at this gathering, and we basically split up into men and women. And I remember being out there with the men, and we were asked to introduce ourselves, like kind of go around in a circle and introduce ourselves. And so we're introducing ourselves, and we're talking through everything. And I'm like, I go first actually. And so I'm like, hey, my name is David Crankfield. I'm a convert to the Catholic faith. I'm a husband and a father. I work for Hallow. I host Seeking Excellence podcast. Next person goes, they're like, and I think everybody else was single. I don't think there was another married guy there. They're like, hey, I'm, Billy Bob, and I work at this place. I'm Joe, and I work here. And then some guy, as you always have, is like, isn't it sad that we all identify just with what we do for work? And I'm like, no, I don't really think that it is. It's like the second thing that we know about St. Joseph is that he was a carpenter. If you ask some random person off the street, like, what are the things you know about St. Joseph? They'd be like, he's the husband of Mary, father of Jesus, and he was a carpenter. Those are like the things you know him by. And it's like, what more do you want to be known by the end of your life as a man, right? It's like what you did at work, and most importantly, your obviously your faith too. We know that he was Jewish and Christian, but your faith, your family, and your work. That's like your life as a man. Sure, you have hobbies and stuff. I don't really care that much about your hobbies. As a man, especially as a husband and father, like I want to know what you do to provide. I want to know if we can do things together to provide together. I want to know if I can learn from you in the area of providing, right? Like I don't care that you fish that much, to be perfectly honest. And I'm down to talk about fishing, but I like more to talk about business and the things you do for work and how I can learn from that. I don't think we have to have this like, I think it's a feminine thing, to be honest with you, because a feminine life, yes, you have faith and then you have your family. For like, I think of Emily, right, as a stay-at-home mother and wife. Those, Catholicism, me, and Jordan are the three biggest things in her life. Next, outside of that, you want to talk about the things that she enjoys doing and the type of things she's into, and she'll talk about usually things that are offshoots of those things. So she's crunchy and into crunchy things, and that's like her favorite thing to talk about. Why? Because of the fact that she thinks that helps her to be a better wife and mother, right? She's keeping us healthier. She's helping to ensure that we're living longer and living healthier lives. And so I don't think we have to have this like shying away from our vocations. I think it's a good thing. And this is where I think that becoming a respectable man, your profession and your work are a big part of that. Going back to the example that I gave before, if I was some 31-year-old living at home, not can't keep a job, would you respect me? Let's be honest. We don't have to act like this is some crazy thing. You probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast. You probably wouldn't be following me. And I would appreciate that and understand that if that was the case, right? And so we can recognize all of these things. We can see that, okay, we don't want to make our work and our profession like the main thing about us, like the red pill guys do. Making money is not your only value in life. It is largely, by most surveys, what you're going to be graded as a potential partner. They say, I just watched a great video on this. I forget who sent it to me, or it was on somebody's story. Was it Jordan Peterson? I can't remember. No. I remember who it was. I can't remember that guy's name either. Scott Galloway, maybe. But he was talking about the things that women look for in a partner. And I've heard this before, and I've heard this given as advice to women too, is that it's not necessarily how much money you make today, but it's your ability to show that you have the potential to be a provider, that you have the potential to make a decent income and provide for a family. That's what a lot of women, even secular women, are looking for in a spouse. I think it's even more so true for a Catholic woman. And so it's like, if you want to be respectable, you have to be pursuing a respectable career, right? I don't know a single Catholic woman that I would recommend if I had the best guy in the world, but he was a barista at Starbucks and he wasn't like fresh out of seminary just finding a job, but he was like okay 3 years into being a barista at Starbucks and was not doing anything about it. I can't think of a single woman I would encourage to date that man. Why? Because I don't respect him. And I'm not going to encourage somebody to date somebody I don't respect as a man. And so we can recognize that your profession, your work, your accomplishments in those areas are going to lead to you respecting yourself more. How you show up to work. Do you work hard? Right? Doesn't mean every single one of us has to be a doctor. But you want to have some level of respect for what you do. And you want to have a career that's respectable for other people. Right? And I think that that's okay for us to realize and acknowledge the reality that people are judging you based on what you do. And that's why we share it in those circles. Because some guys are doing awesome and cool things, and some guys are just kind of floating along, figuring it out. And I'm not really that interested in being friends with the floaters. If you need some help and some guidance, sure, I'll help you out. But if you're just like passive and okay with being lukewarm and mediocre in multiple areas of your life, especially in work, we're just not made to be best friends. And that's okay. There's a place for you in the church. There's a place for you in the world. I hope that you find happiness in whatever that looks like to you. I'd encourage you that I don't think you'll be fully happy until you start to be fulfilled and start to get after it a little bit. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're unique in that way. And so thinking about this, we can lose respect of other people. Respect is a fragile thing. We want respect. And how do we become respectable? I think it's in these different areas. It's the way that you dress, the way that you show up. It's the fact that you keep your beard trimmed and you don't have a nasty neck beard going out and hair all down the back of your neck. You know how to dress decently and show up somewhere. You know how to be on time. You know how to articulate and express yourself, and you understand and have strived to grown more skilled in communication, in the art of communication. You've grown in knowledge and wisdom and the things that you know about, and you know about important things. You know about what's happening in the world. You're wise in areas that matter, like personal finance and business and relationships and mindset and the faith, obviously, in philosophy, in character, in virtue. You have confidence, and you have confidence because you've developed a track record over time of doing difficult things, doing hard things, tackling challenges head on. And you also have a career that you're working towards or that you're already in that is respectable to other people, and that you respect yourself, that you feel good about, and you're working hard and you're progressing along in your career. But most importantly, your character. You have to be growing in virtue. You have to be growing in character. So this means you're growing in things like humility. You're growing in things like patience. You're growing in things like diligence and temperance. Nobody respects the man that can't control his drink and is just getting drunk and being sloppy and weird, right? Nobody respects that. Nobody respects a man that doesn't have fortitude and gives up at the first sign of things being difficult, or a man that complains all the time. That's not what we're looking for, right? And so if we want to grow in these things, we have to first of all recognize that it's not an entitlement. Respect is something that we have to earn. You can earn it. Each and every one of you that's out there, we can earn the respect of other people, and that your life will be much more fulfilled as a husband, as a father, as a coworker, as a friend, as a person at your church, in your community, and society as a whole. If you're respected by other people, especially by those whose respect you want and who you respect. And so that's going to be it for today. Again, if you want to join us at seekingexcellence.locals.com, early access to the podcast, it's already available there. And we'll have continue to share other resources and content that I find valuable that have sparked a lot of these thoughts and helped me to grow into the man that I am today, and spark a lot of great conversations in my friendships, in my life, at my dinner table, and a lot of great thoughts and deep reflections in my mind. So thanks for tuning in today, wherever you listened and however you listened, wherever you watched. May God bless you. And now it's time for you to go out there and be your best.